Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing our Jiang Wei's Northern Expeditions Let's Talk Lore series with episode 2, titled Probing Attacks in Longxi. Before we get started, here's the answer to the trivia question from the end of our last episode, and be sure to stay tuned until the end of this episode for a new trivia question. Now, in our last episode, we introduced Jiang Wei's upbringing in the Tianshui Commandery and his tutelage under Zhuge Liang after his defection to the Shu Han side at the end of Zhuge Liang's first northern expedition back in 228. 10 years later, in 238, Jiang Wei will finally get his first opportunity to launch his own northern expedition. At this time, Emperor Cao Rui of Wei had just ordered the Wei Grand Commandant, Sima Yi, and 40,000 of the western garrison troops to march all the way across China to deal with Gongsun Yuan's rebellion in Liaodong. And naturally, this became an opening that the Shu Han Emperor, Liu Shan, decided to seize upon, as he would order the Shu Han Grand General, Jiang Wei, to mobilize forces into Hanzhong so that they could be ready to strike at the Kingdom of Wei if an opportunity should arise. Jiang Wei, who held the title of Fu Han Jiangjun, or the general who assists the Han, was also amongst the units sent alongside Jiang Wan into Hanzhong, and once there, Jiang Wan was quickly promoted to the title of Da Sima, or the Supreme Military Commander for Shu Han, while Jiang Wei was also promoted to the position of Sima, which put him second in command. Now, philosophically, Jiang Wan was not a believer in his predecessor Zhuge Liang's strategy of the northern expedition, or at the very least, he did not believe he was capable of leading such an expedition, as he personally felt inferior to Zhuge Liang when it came to military matters. So if Zhuge Liang could not bring success to such a costly and difficult strategy, then Jiang Wan argued that he had no chance either. So instead, Jiang Wan focused most of his energy on strengthening the defense in Hanzhong and exploring the possibility of an eastern approach, sailing down the Han River to target the Shangyong region, instead of tracking across the Tianling mountain ranges to attack Chang'an. Meanwhile, Jiang Wei had other ideas, as he was a firm believer in his mentor Zhuge Liang's northern expedition strategy, and given that he was a local to the Longxi region, Jiang Wei wanted to resume the northern expeditions. Now, this difference in ideology on the northern expedition did not create any friction or lead to any clashes between the two commanders, as Jiang Wei was far too junior in comparison to Jiang Wan's status at this time, and more importantly, Jiang Wan did not oppose to the idea of having Jiang Wei lead probing attacks on the Longxi region, as long as the investment of troops was limited. So in 238, Jiang Wei launched his first northern expedition, with an unrecorded number of troops that could not have been more than 10,000, as he would also take the Mount Qi path taken by Zhuge Liang in his first northern expedition exactly a decade ago, and probe for opportunities against the Wei forces in the Longxi region. Now, before we continue with this discussion, it's important to give a geography lesson on the term Longxi, as we'll see this term quite a bit throughout this series, as this would be the region that would be the focus of all Jiang Wei's northern expeditions. The two-character term Longxi can be broken down to Long and Xi, where Long stands for the Long Mountain Range, and Xi stands for West, as this term encompasses the region west of the Long Mountain Range. Prior to Zhuge Liang's third northern expedition, the entirety of the Longxi region was controlled by Wei, but in the aftermath of Zhuge Liang's third northern expedition, the southern half of this region fell under Shu Han control, which is where the borders remained. On the Shu Han side, this southern half was subdivided into two commanderies in Yinping and Wudu, while on the Wei side, the northern half was subdivided into four commanderies in Longxi, Nan'an, Tianshui, and Guangwei. Now, Longxi here is the name of a Wei commandery, as well as the region at large. So unless I specify and use the exact term Longxi commandery, Longxi will simply by default refer to the entire region as we go forth in this series. And seeing the map here, it's not difficult to see why Jiang Wei would choose this region to attack, as he was born and raised in the Tianshui commandery. Furthermore, this is also the region that Zhuge Liang chose to attack in his very first northern expedition, as Zhuge Liang believed this was the most achievable and natural expansion for the kingdom of Shu Han for two key reasons. First, the low mountain ranges made it difficult for Wei to reinforce this region, and could also become a natural barrier against Wei once the Longxi region was captured. Second, the Long Mountain Range was a much easier path to traverse than the Qinling Mountain Range to the north of Hanzhong, thus making Longxi an easier location to launch future attacks against Wei. However, after Zhuge Liang's first northern expedition, the first key point here was no longer true, as the Wei general and the prefect of the Yong province in Guohuai would increase the local garrison forces to the point where the Wei forces in Longxi could easily defend long enough to receive reinforcement from the western garrison at Chang'an, as the entire focus of the Wei court would shift west after Zhuge Liang's first northern expedition. So by 238, when Jiang Wei now pushes his force through Wudu towards the Wei commandery of Nan'an to probe for any signs of weakness in the Wei defense, Guo Huai was ready and waiting, as Jiang Wei's first probing attack here would end without much fighting, as Jiang Wei would avoid large engagement with the Wei forces, knowing the limitations of his own small army. While Jiang Wei's first northern expedition here would end without much fanfare, in September of the same year, the Shu Han administrator of the nearby Yinping commandery in General Liao Hua would actually launch an attack of his own, targeting a Qiang tribe loyal to Wei. To answer this attack, Guo Huai would send administrator Wang Yun of Guangwei commandery and the administrator You Yi of the Nan'an commandery, along with their own commandery garrisons, to rescue the Qiang vassal forces and try to eliminate Liao Hua. Initially, the Wei reinforcement had great success, as they soon encircled Liao Hua's army on a nearby mountain. With Wang Yun's forces east of the mountain and You Yi's forces on the west, it looked like it would just be a matter of time before they would collapse and destroy Liao Hua and the Shu Han forces. And we know the details of this battle from a report written by Guo Huai to the Wei court. However, not long after this report was sent out, Liao Hua would exploit the scattered nature of the Wei encirclement in a concentrated counterattack that would not only break their encirclement, but also manage to kill the Guangwei administrator Wang Yun in the course of battle, as Wang Yun would be struck by a fatal stray arrow in the chaos of the fighting. Ultimately, no territories would exchange hand, but Liao Hua would manage to score quite a victory against the Wei side, as the hostile Qiang tribe was removed, the Wei army took heavy losses, and a Wei administrator would be killed. Now, for those who don't remember, Liao Hua was originally Guan Yu's chief secretary, who had been captured alongside Guan Yu by Sun Quan's forces. Initially, Liao Hua was spared and agreed to surrender, as Sun Quan would end up making him administrator. But once Liao Hua reunited with his mother, who was being held hostage by the Wu forces, he went on to fake his own death before escaping the Wu side with his mother, as he would sneak his way back to Liu Bei at the start of the Yiling campaign. Then Liao Hua would survive the defeat at Yiling and eventually go on to serve as a general in Zhuge Liang's army until the capture of Yinping during the Third Northern Expedition, which is when Liao Hua was named as the local administrator. And this was not an easy post, as Yinping was not only on the borders with Wei, it was also a true frontier commandery that was underdeveloped, remote, and had the majority of its population being the Qiang tribe. Yet Liao Hua would once again thrive in this role, as apart from his isolated attack in 238, we'll see Liao Hua become more and more involved with Jiang Wei's future northern expeditions, but for the time being, Jiang Wei's army and scale of his probing attacks were still far too small to drag Liao Hua and the Yinping commandery into the fold. And this would be the case for Jiang Wei's second attempt in 240 as well. In this second attempt, Jiang Wei's forces would once again raid near the borders and once again try to probe for Wei weakness, until Guo Huai would personally arrive with an army and garrison the Wei forces near the borders at a place called Qiangzhong, at which point Jiang Wei simply retreated his forces back to Wudu, spelling an end to another quick and fruitless northern expedition. At the end of this second northern expedition, there would be a period of transition inside the Shu Han court following the retirement of Jiang Wan due to poor health, as Jiang Wei would be promoted to the Grand General who stabilizes the West, and given the role as the prefect of the Liang province in 243, and Fei Yi would become his direct superior in this year as well. But much like Jiang Wei, Fei Yi also did not believe in the northern expedition strategy, and while Jiang Wei would be allowed to continue his smaller scale northern expeditions, Fei Yi also placed the same hard cap on his troop count at less than 10,000. But despite this constraint, the situation out west will soon have some drastic changes, as Jiang Wei would soon go on to score back-to-back minor victories in his next 3 northern expeditions. But for now, our episode here will come to an end, as we'll return next time to discuss what exactly changed out west. And hopefully y'all have enjoyed this episode enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just hit that like button, as our next episode in the series will drop once this episode reaches 300 likes. And until then, bye!